Welcome to Health Professionals Outside the Box podcast. In this series, I'll be talking to health professionals who've leveraged their professional skills to pursue alternative income sources, alternative careers, and entrepreneurship. We will gain insight into their motivations, experiences, and challenges, and learn how we too can carve our own path to finding purpose, fulfillment, and financial freedom. I'm your host, Fee. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to this episode of the podcast. So joining me today is Mr. Khaka. He's a social worker and a mental health practitioner, as well as a director of 3 supported living accommodation facilities for adults and young people. Lewis, welcome.
Thank you very much, Fisiwe.
So tell us about yourself and your professional background.
Yes, I mean, as you correctly introduced me, I am a social worker and also trained as a mental health nurse and worked in child and adolescent mental health services, also worked as a mental health practitioner, worked as a social worker, and also as a best interest assessor. I started my company, Care Advocates, in 2013. I think it was January 2013. And we have been going through since. On certain occasions, we've actually had more than 3 locations, maybe even 5 or 6. But, it's a very changing landscape. So I hope your listeners will take note of that sometimes it's not about how many or size and stuff like that. It's the quality of the work and the quality of the tickets that you have on your books. I say tickets because not referring to the people, but the contracts themselves. Because on occasions, you get short-term contracts or you get long-term contracts. And as anyone who's in the business will tell you, the longer, the better, because then it gives you stability to provide the support. Now, going back to my sort of background, I started off as a social worker in social services, Croydon. I've also worked in Devon. I've also worked in Swindon. I've also worked in child and adolescent mental health across London. So yeah, it's a varied experience, and I'm registered as both a social worker and a mental health nurse.
So for those that aren't too sure, may you please explain what a supported living business structure is?
Okay, well, there's many facets to it, really. When I started, I was looking at what we call 16 plus. This is when you look after young people in a residential setting where they share accommodation and you provide the support. You provide both accommodation and support. That's predominantly what supported living is. You're just there to enable them. It's not a care home. A lot of people always mistake that for a care home, but it's not. What it is, it's you're enabling and empowering young people to then be able to live by themselves and also to make choices and decisions for their own lives. So that is a very important and central role in the development of a young person. Now, and then there's the adult side of things. Same concept. However, you are working with people who are a lot older, and the reason they require support in their accommodation is predominantly because either they have a learning difficulty or learning disability, as some people prefer to call it, or they have mental health challenges and will require constant support to ensure that their mental health is monitored, and their responsible clinicians back in the community hospitals are aware if there's any deterioration. But central to that is obviously empowerment, recovery, and ensuring that their human rights are respected. And there's a huge drive at the moment by the Care Quality Commission to ensure that when people are in supported living accommodation, it actually is supported living and not a care home type setup. So for those of your listeners that want to go into this business, into the adult supported living side of things, they have to be mindful of the fact that you only provide the support and not the accommodation. That's a huge difference, because when you're working with young people, you do both. You provide the house and the support.
Support.
Yes. However, on the adult side of things, there's a very new and quite, robust drive to ensure that there's a clear separation between you providing the accommodation and support. The reason for that is the Care Quality Commission wants people to have their own tenancies and have true what they say, true tenancy, where you have nothing to do with the accommodation. Because if you own the building and they don't want you to provide their support, they can't do that, because then you might end up kicking them out.
Oh.
So what the Care Quality Commission says, there must be zero, link between the accommodation and support, because they want all service users who are back in the community to be able to choose where they live. Not only that, however, and also choose the people or the company that provides their support.
What were your motivations behind setting it up?
When you start a business like this, you've got to have the passion for it, which is what I had, having worked with young people, who are disadvantaged, with very challenging behaviors, and also having, as a social worker, visited some placements where I thought the care being delivered was not to the expected standard to, produce outcomes for the young people. So I thought I could do a better job. And that's how I started. The adult side of things, I literally got pulled into it by the commissioners, who were happy with what we were doing with the children, and put us through to the adults, teams, to say, okay, we believe that these people can deliver, and give them a chance.
Or did you have a property, or were you renting a property at the time?
When I started off on the children's side, it was rented properties, and that presents challenges of its own, because you'll find that a lot of landlords are not too keen. It's almost, there's a stigma around young people with mental health problems. So I started off by renting before acquiring our own properties. You just make sure you find the right kind of landlord, and you have a good understanding. Give them a good understanding of what it is you want to do. Don't only look at it as a business to make money, but a lot of landlords get motivated when they hear about the outcomes you're trying to get for these people, for the young people, because some of them might have been grown up in care themselves.
And what other things would someone have to consider in terms of the property itself?
There's a misconception that you need HMO, not for young people. You don't, because they don't own they don't have tenancies. So, it's a lot more easier between 16 and 18 to have more than 3 people in one place. That because none of them have tenancies, and you tend to find it's a bit of a revolving door sometimes, because they only come with you for 2 months, the behavior gets out of hand, and the placement becomes inappropriate, and they move on. So there's almost, a revolving door. You don't need planning permission or anything like that, unless you want to go on the adult side. You want to provide both accommodation and supported living, because again, on the adult side of things, there's supported living only, where you provide, where the regulated activity is personal care, but in a supported living facility for people with learning difficulties or mental health challenges or anything like that. Or you can have care, accommodation and support, where you also control the accommodation. Now there's a different set of rules for that one, which we'll go into later. So
when you are providing the accommodation, did you have to do any refurbishments to make it suitable for your service users?
A lot of refurbishments. It's highly unlikely that you will find a property that's good to go from scratch. You've got to be prepared to put in a lot of money. And this is where, your links with good, workmen come in handy. If you know a good workman with a good reputation, proper qualifications, they should be your best friend if you want to get into that kind of business.
What sort of financial considerations or startup costs did you have to make prior?
Okay, all right. When we started on the children's side, all I needed to do, it was a bungalow somewhere in South Croydon. It was a bungalow that we rented out, had a 3-year tenancy on it. The only thing I changed, lucky enough, they'd also done some refurbishments with the hope of trying to rent it out. But because of the money they were looking for, they weren't getting, their first preference was to get a family in there, but that didn't happen because the rentals were a bit high. So we came in and said, listen, I'll pay you the money you're asking for. And on top of that, I'll make a few enhancements to your property, i.e., proper security and fire doors and, making sure that all the bathrooms and bedrooms meet the standard of, that's required to run a supported living business. So if you're asking for exact figures, I always say to people, the cake is big enough for everyone. Not one person is going to eat.
Sure.
I know there's a tendency among our people sometimes to want to keep the information to themselves and not want to help. People are different, I guess, but it's such a huge industry. There's not even one company that can do all the work by themselves. So I'll be more than happy to give you specifics if you need them. In terms of when we started, so the fire doors didn't cost much. Bought them from B&Q, got them, sorted out. This treatment that they put in, these little rubber strips, got a fire safety certificate, which in itself was also easy to get because the property was fairly new. So I spent less than 1,000 initially on that particular property. But then what I would say is anyone who wants to get into this business, you're not going to get a referral the first day you start trading. You've got to be prepared. What I always say to people is only put in what you're prepared to lose. But it's a safe bet to say to yourself, I'm not going to have anyone for the next 6 months. Because once you're in that mindset, it makes it very easy for you to do it, because emotionally and financially it is very, very difficult.
Because the property can be empty for about 6 months and you still pay rent.
Oh, yeah. And mind you, when I started, I didn't know anyone, even though I was a social worker. Mind you, a lot of people, when you're on the other side of the counter, they're always telling you, listen, when you set your own thing, we're going to help you, we're going to support you. Once you do it, it's a different story. People just disappear from sight.
Had you saved up some money? Were you working as well as a social worker or mental health?
I was a locum social worker. That's the only thing that helped me, because there was no way I was going to be able to start all that on a salary, because the money required is quite,
substantial, it sounds like.
Yeah. So for example, I would say if you have 20,000, you can do it for less, depending. I mean, if you're outside London, I'm sure it will be less, I don't know what your other contributors have said, but in London, it is not cheap. I can tell you that, because the properties themselves, for a decent 4-bed, which meets all the requirements, you're looking at, rentals of £2,000 and above.
Goodness.
So when you multiply that by 6, that's 12,000. I mean, if you're working on the premise that, I'm prepared to lose 6 months rentals before I get anyone, that's 12,000. And if you're employing people, that's even even bigger expense. But however, the good thing about on the supported living on the children's side is you don't have to employ anyone until you get your first referral.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes, unlike where you need a registered manager if you're trying to start up a children's home or you want to start up a care home. There's some regulatory stuff that needs to be in place, and there's no guarantee that they'll come and inspect you in the next 4 or 5 months.
So you could be waiting.
You could be waiting for a very long time, but the bills don't wait.
They don't. How do you find the landlords? Would it be private landlords? Are there certain organization which you would approach?
I believe there are some organizations where a landlord, has more than 200 properties across the country. I've never come across one, but I believe they're there. So I couldn't give you any names of who you might approach because I'm not 100% sure. What I can tell you is what I did. I just went on a website called Open Rent, where you rent directly from the landlord. Yes, Open Rent. You go directly to the landlord, introduce yourself, be prepared to be rejected quite a number of times. It comes with the territory.
So what would you have to prepare prior to speaking to the landlord? What sort of things would the landlord want to know?
Again, it comes down to your pitch. You've got to be personable, I guess, when you talk to them. The first thing, if you call them and they answer and you say, listen, I'm looking for a place to put young people who are coming out of care, you're most likely going to get a rejection. because of the stigma that follows it. However, what I did was slightly different. I asked to meet them. We looked at the house. They like me. I liked them. Already, when you meet someone, the first impressions count, don't they?
They do.
So the first words that come out of your mouth, if you're a personable person and you're nice, you're polite, you get them, you pique their interest, so to speak. And then what I did, I only brought in the business I do right at the end.
Okay.
I said, listen, I'm trying to make a difference. I work as a social worker. I'm trying to make a difference. And talking to you, I see that you're also a person that I think can help you achieve this vision. Mind you, the reason they don't want you, or they don't want to even consider it from the word go, is because they fear that the property is going to be destroyed and you're going to irritate the neighbors and their reputation and stuff like that. So you've got to close those gaps before you even mention what you do. Okay. So you've got to say, you've got to let them know that, listen, we have two staff all the time and we're not getting violent young people. We're just getting young people that have got nowhere to go. We're trying to make a difference. And I think if we work together, we might actually help these young people to make a difference. And it tends to work for me. So it might not work for everyone, but for me, if I really want a property, I've always been able to sort of end up getting it.
So, because you have 3 facilities now, how long did it take you to then get to the third one?
No, remember, I used to have more than 3.
Oh, really? How many did you have?
At one point, where I had about 6. If you add the solo placements, even more.
All right.
So yes. So what I'm trying to tell you, remember what I said when we first started, is it's a very challenging landscape because remember it's unregulated. So what that means is anybody can open a place like yours. And what the local authorities do, they open up these, these tenders that where you can get onto the panel and stuff like that. And they put too many people on it and they don't have enough business for everyone. And some of these, because we had been in some of these areas for a very long time, but new players came in, they undercut our rates and stuff like that. And for me, if I cannot deliver the service safely, I don't care about the money. I'd rather close it than operate, just making shortcuts. And you find that all the areas that I pulled out of, they're all asking me to come back.
That's a reflection, I guess, to the service that you're providing before.
Yes. That's why I always say to people, I'm very open. Anybody that comes to me, I always give you the 100%. And I always say, chase the service, the money will come after that. If you're providing an excellent service, you will not be afraid to charge the right price. Whereas the guy that's trying to undercut you just wants to get in there.
So you had to close the other 3 for those reasons?
Yes, I closed them because you'd only have one person because they felt that we were too expensive, and there's people who could do it. What other people? Because we were working on a specific model. Our units would not take more than 4 people, whereas these guys would open and take 8 people and just put 1 member of staff there, and so they could then charge half what we were charging. Okay. But what we did was, for the 4 people that we had, we achieved all the outcomes.
You mentioned earlier about a tender. For those who don't know what that is, can you just briefly explain what the submission is, that process?
Okay. Well, what the local authorities do is they put together, they tender out the work that they want people on what's called it's called different things in different boroughs, really. DPS or dynamic purchasing system or direct contract or whatever. What it is, it's just a tender where you all bid for work and you're put on a panel of approved suppliers. So every time there's a referral, they send 1 email to all 20 of you. And then you then respond to that email to say, yes, I can take this person or I can't. Now, different local authorities ask different questions, because I've had people coming to me and saying, listen, I need you to, and I'm doing this tender, please, can I see the tender you did for such and such a borough? And I always say, okay, I can give you. However, it's completely different what they ask for. Yeah, depending on which borough you've gone, you've approached.
Okay.
I mean, the gist is the same, but there's very minute details there which make a difference that are different.
What would you say are the key points that people should focus on or be aware of when submitting a tender?
Well, as long as you understand what outcome-based approach is, mind you, what the local authority is looking for someone who can give them the most competitive rate, but also give them a promise that they will achieve the outcomes for the young people. Because if you get someone who's 16, you're looking, the expectation is that once they turn 18, they should be able to get a job, look after themselves, cook for themselves, budget their funds, the normal things that you and me who didn't grow up in care are expected to do when we leave home. So it's just more or less the same thing that's expected. If you can demonstrate that you have the skills and expertise to do that safely, then you have a better chance of being accepted onto the tender.
Okay. I hear it's highly competitive, isn't it, submitting one? How long can it take for approval?
Depending on boroughs. I mean, for example, if you're looking at places like Reading, they normally let you know within a week. You'll know that you've made it. But there's other boroughs, particularly in London, that have a two-step process. You have to go through the first stage. If you're accepted on that first stage, then you have to again submit papers for the second stage.
Would you recommend someone works with an individual that's knowledgeable and experienced on writing tenders?
I've never done it, so I don't know the quality of the work that they do. So it's hard for me to vouch for an opinion either way. It's very hard. I do my own tenders. I do my own, I write my own tenders, and I've got my operations manager who I've trained, who's also now quite proficient at it. So sometimes he even goes for those tenders without me even knowing. He just comes to me and says, listen, we're on this panel now. Okay. However, listen, if you're going to get into this business, you've got to know, at least you've got to know something, something about it. And if you're going to get into it and someone else does the tender for you, I don't know. I just find it doesn't sit well with me, because in business, the first principle of business is do something that you're familiar with. Because then you can rely on yourself. Those questions are not rocket science. They're not the rocket science that they're made out to be. If you do your research, you can provide the answers that can see you through. Because a lot of people are losing money because, mind you might pay someone $2,500. There's no guarantee that you're going to be accepted. And if you lose, you're still going to pay them the money.
That's it. I also understand there's a process of registration with CQC, which is the Care Quality Commission's regulatory body. How long does that process take?
At the moment, it's taking over 6-7 months.
Would you still have to wait until you've had the CQC approval before you start taking services?
It depends. Well, it depends. No. The answer is yes and no. No, in the sense that if the people that you're looking after do not require you to perform a regulated service, i.e. personal care, then yes, you can continue, you can proceed as,
okay.
There's no problem with that. You can continue trading. However, if you're telling the CQC that you want to perform a regulated service and you cannot perform that service until you're authorized to. So
you have to factor that in when you then rent a property, that there's a potential that property could be empty until CQC approval, 7-8 months.
Right. Now I'm gonna tell you, this is what I'm going to tell you now is very, very, very important. Now, if you're registering with CQC to perform, to perform a supported living service, where you provide personal care, but not the accommodation, you do not need a property. Remember what I said earlier?
Oh, yes. The
CQC does not want you to own a property and rent, and be the landlord and the care provider at the same time. I mean, there's companies that are somehow getting away with it because they started doing this a long time ago and they've had some very good CQC ratings. So I think the view on that is, listen, these guys are doing what they're supposed to be doing, so we make an exception. But for anyone new, what you do is you have to find an office. Your office is where your registered, your regulated service is going to be performed from.
Okay.
i.e., that's where you're going to manage it from. Because what the CQC want, they want, where is this service going to be managed from? Because they don't want the address of where, you're actually doing the personal care, unless if it's a care home, you're going for both accommodation and support. But if it's just supported living only, where you are only providing the support component of that arrangement, then you can have an office somewhere, and then you can send your staff to go into people's homes. That's the thinking behind it. However, I hope this is not controversial. What some people do is they then form another company that's like an estate agent. They find the property, because it's very hard for the local authorities to find accommodation for the service users. So their hands are quite tied as well. So you then form another company that goes and talks to a landlord, agree on a rental, and let them know what it is you're going to be doing. Make sure the house itself, meets all the safety requirements, health and safety requirements. And then that other company will then have tenancies with the service users.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And then your other company only goes in to provide the support. That's what some people do.
All right.
It's not illegal, but sounds like a loophole to me.
Can be contentious, I guess.
it can be. However, you're not breaking the law, because there's nothing stopping you to own another company that's whether then, good practice demands that you declare an interest in the other company. That's for another day. I don't know.
So you are completely non-clinical. You have a non-clinical role as a director. What does your role entail?
Well, I do have, the nearest thing to clinical that I have now is because now my company also works with a university in London where we provide placements, for them. So I have to then sign them off as the supervisor, placements, practice supervisor.
When did you start taking on students for placements?
I started not so long ago. One of my old lecturers came to me and approached me and said, listen, we need you to do this, because they'd heard about what I'm doing now. So they said, listen, are you still registered? I've always kept my registration. I know some people, once they start the business, they then forget, they let their registration lapse. So for any social workers, nurses, OTs out there, or physios that want to get into this business, always keep your registration. That's my advice. I do my CPD. I'm up until, I'm still a BIA, although it's all changing now with this new, liberty stuff that's going on. But I always keep on top of, do my CPD without fail every year. I always find a course that I do and, reflect on my practice and all, the whole shebang. Yes. You asked earlier on what I do as a director, right?
Yes.
Now, as the director, my main role is to ensure that my team is delivering the support that we promise the commissioners, and ensuring that we have the systems that keep people safe, and also the systems that enable people, people's freedom, independence. That's a big thing these days, and understanding and making sure my staff understand what deprivation of liberty is and why they should be mindful that their practice, does not infringe on legislation. And also ensuring that, my other role is ensuring that the business itself as a going concern remains viable. And making difficult decisions sometimes, like, for example, having to close off some places, but also trying to do it in a way where you can then redeploy your human resources. Because for anyone that's going to start this business, I'll tell you now, your biggest resource is your staff, and finding good staff is very, very difficult. No, finding staff is easy. Finding good staff is extremely difficult. And forget about minimum wage. You have to pay a lot more than that if you're going to attract the right people.
Okay.
So part of it, I have my role as a director. I have to ensure that we remain viable, that our people are well looked after, and that they're doing what they're supposed, what we're commissioned to do. And also ensuring that, the service users, their families and their relatives all work collaboratively to ensure that they help us attain outcomes for their loved ones.
What skills have you been able to transfer from your clinical role as a practitioner to your...
I suppose for me, starting off, the thing that really helped me was having the knowledge and understanding what, for example, autism is, because there's a lot of people who have, who live with autism that you have to support. And it's not the easiest task, I can assure you. But, having previous experience working with those people and also being a frontline clinician myself when I was in CAMS and in social work and all the training that I received, that was very useful. But I'll tell you what, the biggest asset that you can have, is empathy and understanding. Mm. You don't need a degree for that or a registration for that. That should come naturally, and understanding that mental health or learning difficulties, no one chooses to have that.
And which is something, I guess, which most health professionals learn to develop over the years through training and experience. Mm.
Yeah, but you can still have a nurse or a social worker that's completely detached emotionally from what's going on around them.
That's true. But do you not think that sometimes maybe burnout can lead to that?
Oh, yeah. Mm. Well, burnout, when I was, frontline social work, that was difficult. I mean, you get a caseload of 30. How on earth are you going to look after 30 families? Impossible. I mean, I struggle looking after my own family, never mind 30, so. But that's the expectation anyway. So This is why people end up thinking, you know what, I'm done. And they're so done that even to get into this business, they're not too keen. But I managed to turn it around because, I knew that there had to be a link between this going as a business, but also as a place of empathy and support for the people that we look after.
What has been the most challenging aspect of running supported living accommodation?
Remember earlier on we were speaking, I said sometimes it's like a revolving door. And you get young people, particularly for those that are doing 16 pluses. I don't do that anymore, although, I've got a lot of local authorities that are constantly phoning me to ask me to get back onto that side of the business. It's very hard because you're working with young people who have had a very rough start to life, and, those shortcomings, the resultant shortcomings manifest themselves in behaviors that you just cannot comprehend. For example, I'll give you my worst case scenario. I don't want to scare anyone who wants to go into this business. Believe me, it's pretty rewarding if you're doing the right thing, but it can be a challenge. I've had an entire property trashed.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, because a staff member, again, they come and tell you, listen, I want to do 48 hours a week. I'm looking after, I need the money, and you fall for that, and you let someone do 4 days, and they really you cannot do 4 days with people with challenging behavior. Impossible. But when I was starting, I was naive, and I thought, you know what? This guy wants to do the job. In the end, they become emotionally unavailable to the young people who are very needy. And what do they do to get your attention? They'll smash the place up, smash your TV, smash glasses, fight with each other, bring drugs onto the placement, bring knives and the whole lot. It's not easy.
How did you deal with that?
Again, my experience in CAMS came in handy, and working carefully with the GPs to ensure that those that were on medication were supported to continue being concordant with their medication. Otherwise, particularly someone who has maybe ADHD or a conduct, we call it conduct disorder, but anyway, I remember when I was growing up, we were called naughty, but anyway. See, when you have people like that, you have to form the relationship from the time they get onto the placement, because if one slight mistake, and it can go down south pretty quickly. And if you're doing it for the money, you'll be out of the business very quickly. There won't be any to make when they start breaking glasses, and the landlord, your neighbor start complaining to the landlord to say, listen, who the hell did you put in this place, man? We can't sleep the whole night. They're smoking weed, and it can become the wild, wild west.
Oh, wow. So yes. It really tests your patience as well as an individual.
It does. And listen, I'm the director of the company, but I can assure you, when I started, I was just a support worker as well. I would come in to support and train. This is one of those, you cannot subcontract this problem to someone else. You have to deal with them.
All right.
Yeah. If you're running a semi-independent, unregulated service, Be prepared to be at the placements every day of your life dealing with problems.
Oh, so for that reason, you no longer take 16 plus. Is it just young adults?
Yeah, the
Upwards.
young adults, for me, it's just too much of a revolving door, because the behavior can be so out there that it then starts affecting the outcomes for the other ones that are making progress. So you have to move that person on. But then, mind you, when the local authority gives you the referral and gives you the young person, they're pretty much knocking your door down for you to accept them. When the shoe is on the other foot and you're saying, guys, the placement is inappropriate for this young person, can you find him something more suitable? No one wants to know. They don't pick up their phones, and the problem is escalating. You get the police involved, and they still don't get involved.
Goodness.
So they will say to you, listen, you should have known this is what you signed up for. Ask anyone who's in this industry, they'll tell you the same thing. They won't move them in a hurry, So the longer the delay, the more the distraction. So, a lot of 16 plus places, it's lone working. You don't have more than one person on shift. Okay. And that's where the problem, that's where you find the problem. If you have 8 people and you have one person, how on earth is he going to be able to, or how he or she going to be able to manage 8 boisterous young people? Yes. And mind you, they're not just 8 individuals, 8, boisterous, pushing boundaries. This is where I say, when you start a business like this, only have a small place where you can provide the best support, a small place with 2 people, and charge the right amount of money for your service. You don't always need to be on a panel, remember? I was never on a panel when I started. I didn't get into any tenders until a few years in. I just sent, cold calling emails to everyone. And the people to send your email to is either the living care team, the commissioners, or this, depending on the local authority. They have different setups, but the looked after manager possibly would be the one to talk to. So, or send an email. Just find out who they are, send them an email. They might not respond to you. Mind you, when I started, I got my first person after, I think it was about 6 weeks. And it was someone I'd sent an email almost 3-4 months prior, before I even started the place.
Okay, so you don't always have to go for the tenders. You can still send direct emails.
Yes, that's why if you have a small place, then you don't have the need to fill 8 spare rooms. So there's a very good chance that every local authority will have, but be prepared to get the most difficult ones, the ones that no one wants. Those are the ones you'll get, guaranteed. But they will help you to be off the ground.
Any lessons learned?
Oh yeah. If I could do anything differently, what would I have done? My initial plan was to get into a children's home, to set up a children's home. That was my initial plan, until I met a colleague that said, listen, man, start off with the easy stuff. You don't want to get into a children's home before you know what it's like in the 16 pluses. Once I got the 16 pluses, my appetite for the children's home waned. So, because it's even worse there. So I thought, you know what, I'll pass. The lessons learned, I should have just started off with the adult supported living. That's the advice I'd give anyone.
And your reasons?
The reasons for that, mind you, there's something we didn't touch on. You didn't ask me where these people, why these people need supported living and where they're coming from. I'll give you an answer to that. The days of the asylum, I don't know how much you know about the days, when they used to have those big places out of town, out of sight, where they'd put old people with mental health difficulties and old people with learning difficulties, where out of sight, where no one would see them, right? That was abandoned about 20 years ago. A new drive said, away with the asylum, and more people should be integrated into the community, which is a very noble drive as far as I'm concerned, because no one chooses to have these things, either a learning difficulty or a mental health problem. So you find that a lot of CCGs and local authorities were closing these places down, and now the drive is these people need to come into the community. That's where our services come in. because we then help them settle and find places in the community where they can be supported, and not in an asylum where that's devoid of love, devoid of empathy, and there's constant restraints, constant medication, constant isolation. Those are the things that the government is fighting against and is making great headway. So what I would say to people is, listen, if you want something that hits the ground running, then the 16 plus is a place to start. But just be aware that it's a revolving door. It's not easy, and it is quite challenging. However, the adults that we then look after, mind you, these people have been in hospital for 20 years, so they cherish their freedom and independence. They appreciate it. So you're more likely to gain outcomes with them. And because they're on medication, so chances are incidents of aggression and violence, although not uncommon, are not as profound as in the 16 pluses.
They're more under control due to the medication.
Yes. Medication and also the training, what we call the positive behavior support training that we get and we deliver to our staff. It helps them deal or equips them with the skills that they need to work with people who have such challenges. And
what is your vision for the future?
Well, as we speak, we are looking for maybe 3 or 4 new places. Again, I've relented. One of them is going to be, believe it or not, 16 plus, or no. Back again. But that's only because, I owe it to some of the people who supported me through the difficult times. And now they also need me to support them, and we'll do the best we can. So the vision for the future definitely is developing our adult side. We have, I think by the end of this year, we should have 3 places up and running. We're just trying to sort out because with some of the local authorities, what they've come to realize is they can actually buy the properties themselves. Yes, and then we come in and provide the around-the-clock support.
Okay.
During David Cameron's time, the government was not spending money in social care as it should have during that whole austerity. So the program was postponed. There's no housing for people with learning difficulties or mental health problems. But with the CQC saying that they don't want us to own the houses, it means somebody else has to own them. There aren't enough private investors wanting to go into it, only because, it's down to ignorance. They just don't understand what's involved. And also the cost side of things, because there's a cap, a housing benefit will only give you maybe, $650, $700 max per month. And the private landlords want a lot more than that. So we're already up against it. But I have managed to talk to a local authority that's actually investing in properties that are being built in the south of London. And we've got agreements in place. We are going to be taking over those places and providing the support.
Okay.
So it looks pretty exciting for the future.
Sounds exciting. It really sounds exciting. I'm glad to have spoken to you. You've shared so much with us and given us an insight into what it entails to own a supported living accommodation. Thank you so much. Where can people connect with you if they wanted to, reach out, or maybe?
I'm going to get you as my secretary on this one, because
that's fine.
You know how hard it's been for us to set this up.
Yes, you're very busy.
I got so much on mind. But listen, I'll give you after this. I'll give you my email address. You can always reach out to me by email, and
okay.
I promise I will try my best to get back to everyone and support.
I'm sure people understand.
I have supported. Listen, I have helped a lot of people to set up for free. I don't charge any money for whatever knowledge I have. It's my place to be charging people who are also trying to do something positive. So, anyone who needs the support, I'll try my best to help as much as I can.
That's fine. That's okay. I'll put the email anyway in the show notes. Well, Louis, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the best with your future and the vision for the future that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, rate it, and review it on iTunes, as this can help others find it. If you'd like updates on the podcast, you can follow the pages on Instagram or Facebook by searching for Well Restorer. If you have any questions or would like to give some feedback,
you can send an email to info@wellrestorer.co.uk. Thanks once again. Take care.